Okay, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Tuesday, December the 17th staff meeting. I would just say that a few of us have a meeting on the east side of town at 11:30. So we certainly want to make sure we get business taken care of today. Just keep in mind, any chance we can hurry, I think we should hurry today so that we're not late for that meeting. So Tom, take it away.
Two issues. We're going to have a discussion on solid waste fee, and just to catch up the public here. We've gotten some concerns from municipalities around the county on escalation of fees between 2024 and what's going to be the fee in 2025. And there's some concerns about charges. So we were just going to kind of review that again. And Susan's here with a presentation. And then just a few minutes at the end, maybe talk about platform, our legislative platform, which is in front of the commission tomorrow for a vote. So that's all we have. So Susan, I'll have you start up.
Good morning, Susan. Welcome.
And just to do a very brief reminder of what the theme is about, I have the regulations in red here. State regulations say that the commissioners can establish a schedule fee to be imposed.
Thank you. We started doing that in 2000 was the first solid waste fee that was billed. Then we implemented it based on waste management plans. So every year the county commissioners approve the solid waste plan and what programs we'll be offering. Also, it says that in establishing the fee, it should be based upon various uses of the real property. So what business, what kind of business, or is it residential? The volume of waste occurring from the different land uses and other factors that you deem fit. So for the history, we first worked on this in the late 90s. The first bill, as I mentioned, was in 2000. And we looked at the different programs we might be offering and then developed tiers. Base rate is basically tier 2 for non-residential. And then you had 1, 3, 4, and 5. And as 5, you can see it's like a mall based on the number of tenants in the mall. Examples in 2000 of the different non-residential agriculture use, commercial, construction, manufacturing, retail, small, medium, large. So you can see it was rather narrow in making the types of tiers. Then back in May of 2023 at a commission meeting, the commissioners asked the staff to form a committee prior to 2024 budget and bring this back and show through analysis how has it changed since 1999 to now. What has changed that might affect the fee? So we developed a committee. We looked through the different tiers that were there and the history of the solid waste and programs and how they've changed through time, and reviewed what's appropriate for the different tiers. So on the committee, we have representatives of the appraiser's office, the clerk's office, environmental resources, and the financial office. So we all have got together then, and then recently, after the questions that came up, the committee got back together again to review the current status. One question the commissioners had was, how's the fee changed through time? So you can see from the very beginning, the purple is the residential rate. So there's that line changing. And notice after each time we dropped the fee down, it immediately started going back up. And costs for us have increased over time, and we've increased the programs as well. So give you an idea of that, since the first fee was developed, when we did that back in the late 90s, we were looking at education on solid waste, how to reduce it, how to handle it, build a HHW facility, and work on the solid waste plan to include more programs as we went along and have the commissioners approve those programs. In green is what has been added since we did that back in the late 90s. I will say there's a second slide full of green as well, but I just want to review some of these items with you. On inspecting the solid waste facilities, we had 2 transfer stations built, 2 construction and demolition facilities built, and my staff goes out and randomly inspects them weekly to make sure they're complying with all of our local regulations. One of those transfer stations has since been closed down and bought by another company who hasn't reopened it yet. That's at South Hoover. And so we're still working on Waste Connections and what they're going to do with that. Household hazardous waste expansion. I just came from a meeting with the contractors this morning. The expansion is going along very well, and we're doubling the size of the facility to the number of customers that come and the amount of material to improve the safety and what we offer. In the years that the facility's been opened, we have collected over 24 million pounds of household hazardous waste. So that's very important. The highest year we had was back in COVID in 2020. We collected just under 1,800,000 pounds of hazardous waste in 1 year. We have customers constantly coming. Right now, the big thing is, when is the swap and shop reopening? In the facility, we have an area where good chemicals are put over there so they can be picked up. And we've had years where we've saved over $70,000 in our disposal costs with a contractor by letting the public have it for free instead of us paying for disposal. So we're expanding that. We have 5 remote collection events a year. That's where we go out in the community to better serve them, so it's easier for them to come instead of coming to our facility. And a lot of those are in the small cities, whether it's Valley Center, Park City, Cheney, Goddard, Garden Plain, Hayesville, Clearwater, Derby. We've moved all around wherever the commissioners select a location. The electronic waste collection events, we've worked with a company that is zero waste company. Nothing is shipped overseas. Everything is recycled. All hard drives are destroyed, whether that's in your laptop, computer, cell phone, copier. They all have a hard drive in it. People don't realize how many are there, and they certainly don't know how to do it themselves. So we work with that company. We've had 5 electronic waste events so far and collected just under 2,900,000 pounds of electronics from those 5 events. We also have waste tire collection events. And with those, we've had 8 events and collected over 1,300,000 tire equivalents. A tire equivalent is the passenger tire for a car that size. If it's a big tractor tire, that may be worth 4 tire equivalents. They base it on the weight of the tire. So we've have had, I know on those events, airport authority, townships, cities, I've talked to them all as they bring in material, and of course, residents and farmers and businesses. We're looking at not allowing businesses in the future for this. Bulky waste coupons, where we let people sign up for a coupon, is good for disposal for free up to 1,000 pounds at the transfer station. We've been doing that for 12 years, and just under 36,800,000 pounds of material has been properly disposed of that way. And the point on this is to cut back on illegal dumping, which causes then public works and cities and townships to clean up what other people have dumped. We also offer illegal dumping forms for townships that when they do find it and clean it up, they get in free to the transfer station, and we get the bill that's paid for through the solid waste fee. Respond to illegal dump sites. We've done that. We work with Metropolitan Area Building and Construction Department to clean up properties that they've cited, and the people will have to pay a fine. But instead of doing that, we offer the dumpsters, the people provide the labor, and the property gets cleaned up that way. It's that time of year, again, for Christmas tree recycling. The township does also neighborhood cleanups. We pay for the dumpsters. Christmas tree recycling is soon coming. We have Christmas tree recycling sites in 12 of the small cities and 10 sites within Wichita. The material, the trees are dumped off, they're mulched, and the mulch is free for the customers or anyone in the community. And I'll tell you, all through this time that we're doing this, we get phone calls, is the mulch ready yet? Because people like that mulch. The storm debris cleanup, we have an air curtain burner and tub grinder, and we have taken the tub grinder out to numerous small cities to help clean up after a storm, ice storm, windstorm, tornado, whatever it is. We'll go out there and help and leave the chips for the parks to use in that city or for collection by citizens. And new next year is mattress coupons, kind of like the bulky waste coupon, but just for mattresses. I've been working with the city of Wichita to use Brooks Construction Demolition Landfill, and they have approved that. So that's one for next year. And give you an idea of what I mentioned earlier about costs and how that have changed for us over time. HHW facility started in 2002. Initial cost of a drum and getting rid of it is $116 a drum. Now look at it, over 2,000. So I'm sorry, I can't see well from here. 2,250, or is that 225? Thank you. That seemed like a horrible increase. But as it is, it's 94% increase. Waste tires has gone up for us 108%. Electronic waste, 200%. 33% for bulky waste. Thank you. This angle is horrible for speaking that. But also our costs have gone up from transfer station costs, 34 a ton to 74 a ton that we're paying now. Price of gasoline or diesel fluctuates, but it's a lot higher than it was back in the late 1990s. So our costs have gone up, and the solid waste fee for residential started at $4.89, went up to $8.38, and now it's back down to $5. So when we look at this, complaints started, back when the commissioners asked us to look into it, we contacted the waste haulers. We did a scientific study picking the exact same time period for all of the businesses to be weighed and check that material. We determined that the tons that businesses were getting rid of range from 12 tons a year to over 1,800 tons a year. That's quite a range. And if you remember the fee earlier, there was not much of a range. So we looked at that, excuse me. We looked at that data. We determined the amount generated by households is basically 1 ton a year. We reviewed the type of waste, the amounts generated. We also looked at who uses the programs. That's why I went into some detail as I was going through those new programs to show that cities use them, citizens and businesses all use the program. And I can give you one example with household hazardous waste where a department store came in with some chemicals they were trying to get rid of, had us weigh them, and they were told that the price would be $16 to get rid of those chemicals. And they were just absolutely shocked. $16? First we thought, are they upset with us? Then it was like, no, last time they got rid of these with the hazardous waste company, it was $360. They've been a customer ever since. So because we have so much volume coming in, have lower rates than what an individual business can do. So we have a long list of businesses and types of businesses that use us. And we developed that new tier system in 2025. For the tiers, we have the base rate up here, what it was and what we proposed, and the change it went down for residents. We had new units of high density residential based on units like apartments, or if they have something extra like restaurants or bars in a hotel. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, All of these were based on waste of tons. If you could see, Tier 5 is over 1,500 tons of waste a year. Tier 4, 500 to 1,500. Tier 3, 101 to 500. So the higher the tier, the more waste disposed of. And that's what we were looking at as a committee as one of the reasons. And also we looked at the programs they use. Here's some examples from the base rates and just apartments, hotels, motels, banks. You can see the highest is hospitals. And that did not even include the medical waste they dispose of. If you've been in a hospital and checked out, you know everything you touched goes in the trash. So there's a large amount of material there. Red is an increase in the tier from before, and green is a decrease. So commissioners approved the resolution on June 12th, looking at these new tier information, and passed a resolution establishing a schedule of fees to be assessed against and charged to real property. Then the bills went out. And when the tax bills went out, people had questions, but 261,177 tax notices sent out. I contacted the appraiser's office, the clerk's office, the people in my office to determine how many calls were coming in from different landowners, because we each got calls from certain cities or emails. 37 out of over 261,000 tax bills. 37 have contacted us with questions. One is, I have multiple statements because they had multiple parcels. They bought land that was consisting of multiple parcels. They built a building on them. I can tell you right now, the county has that too. Under the courthouse, there are multiple parcels, and being a solid waste fee is per parcel. So when we looked at this as a committee, we realized this is going to be difficult. People are going to get multiple bills. And so we need to provide communication on that and how you can bring your parcels together by going to a title company and working with them. And that will save money in the long run instead of getting multiple bills every single year. Make it one parcel, one solid waste fee. So that's how it works. And we were expecting to get some of that. We get calls from, we're a church, we're tax exempt. Well, a fee is not tax. It's a fee. It's like when the city puts a sidewalk down in front of your property and you end up paying a fee for it. It's not the same category. Noticed an increase in the fee. It's like, well, the previous one was lower. Why am I doing this? And we tried to tell them it's because we were tasked with making it more equitable due to the amount of waste and programs used. And a problem is within one land-based code, there's quite a variety. There were, back when we started this, 32 land-based classification standard codes. Now there's 228. So that makes everything more complicated right from the start. Okay, thanks. And the reason we do that are regulations that we have to follow. There's state regulations that land-based classification standard is based on the economic function codes. County appraiser has to follow the LBCS. There's economic function codes to describe an economic function of each parcel of real property. The appraiser is limited in what they can do based on the rules that they have to follow. We talked about that in our meetings recently. All appraisals be informed in compliance with the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, commonly referred to as USPAP. And it's the appraisal standards that our appraisal department must follow when doing the taxes. give you an idea on the land-based standard codes, over on the left is 1,000 through 9,000, 1,000 residents, 2,000 general sales or services, 3,000, go down to 5,000 arts, entertainment, and recreation. That's where parks land. You mentioned cities have been contacting us about their parks. They're a 5,000 code. And there you can see on this that 5510 General Recreation Park. They ended up with all of these others in Tier 4. Now, we asked the question, could we change that to a Tier 3 or Tier 2? Yes, all of those in 5,000 don't have to be the same. But if you start looking at that, well, what about this one or that one or all of the codes, all 228 codes? Where do we draw the line and what we revisit to see if it changes? And I think this is a good example. Residential, no matter what size the house is, it could be large, it could be small, they're paying the same fee. If it's a huge family, large family, medium family, old couple in retirement, single, bachelor, they're all paying the same fee. Now, obviously, all of these are producing different amount of trash or recycling material. And they can all use our programs, the electronic waste event, the household hazardous waste, coupons, all of those can be used by all of these families, but they're all paying the same amount. We don't go house to house to determine how much waste they're throwing away. Example with parks, it could be a large, nice green park with some benches. It could be a smaller playground type park, or really just some land that with trails that you can walk through. But based on the code, within that code, no matter the size of the park, each park pays the same amount along that 5510 code. Same with theaters. It could be a huge multi-theater area. It could have a small theater. It could be a drive-in. They're all the same. Same on the codes. So we thought about this, how we try to make it equitable. Can it be more equitable? But how do we do that within the state regulations or the resolution that was passed by the commissioners? And one thing we all agreed on, we can increase the amount of messaging we do. We did have something in the tax bills that went out. We wanted something larger, a double-sided page with information, but because of everything else that's stuffed in the tax bills, there wasn't enough room. So what we did was and I'll show it in a second, on what we did put in there, we have a website that they can go to for more information and had a QR code. But what we need to really press, something we all talked about in the committee, is combining parcels, getting that message out. You can save money in the future by only having one parcel, work with the title company, get that done, and then you get one bill instead of 5 or 6. I had one church call that has 7 parcels. So get it done. It saves you in the future, saves the headache. On changing tier levels of the base code, really, we would need to do an extensive dive into all 228 codes to be fair, not just one group that's complained. And can we change it within that tier? No. Everything within that 510 number, anything like that has to be the same within it. Here's what was put in the tax bills that shows solid waste fee changes, some information, the website, the QR code, so people could learn more about it. And on the web page, and this is what we did want to put in the tax bill, just briefly on the top, like what is the fee? Why is it changing? How they are changing. And then we have an example of the different tiers for them. And again, you have all of these codes, and within that one line, big or small and park is the same price. So other members of the committee are here. We'd like to answer any questions you have or discussion, recommendations, or direction from the commission.
Okay, Susan, thank you. That's very helpful. Any questions?
Thanks, Susan. Remind me again, why did we create this review to do all this? Because it hadn't been done in 20 years, or tell me,
Because-
just remind me, I'm trying to remember.
For the review of the fees is because it had not been done since we first started in 1999 when we've reviewed, and we had so few programs in line at that time. But over the years, the Solid Waste Committee recommends, hey, why don't you guys do tire events? Or why don't you do this, which requires more money? And the fee, that's why the fee changes over time, is to help address those programs we want to implement. And the commissioners review those every single year. I bring the solid waste plan, and every 5 years is a more in-depth review. So at the meeting in 2023, I believe it was Commissioner Dennis who brought up that it doesn't seem equitable. Are we still at that same level we were in the 90s and what we thought then versus over 20 years later? Now, obviously we weren't. So much has changed. The programs have changed, who uses them changes. And we did that scientific study on how much waste was produced by working with the waste haulers and figuring that out. So because of all of that, we redid the tiers to match life today versus life in 1999.
So, and it's this is per parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So all the parks in Sedgwick County, are they just one parcel? If they have more than one parcel in a park?
Some of them may have two parcels,
So they have to pay two.
Twice. Which is why we are encouraging them to make it one parcel. We would bring in less money by us encouraging them to do this, but it's the right thing to do.
Mark or Ronnie, did you guys want to speak to that
Yes.
too, about the combining of the parcels?
Well, I didn't, and the other thing, I can hear whatever, but the significant jump in tier 4, 5, that businesses, I mean, I see you only have 37 complaints. That's
Mhm. But a lot of them are repeats.
half of them might have been in my district or something. I don't know. But
No,
the businesses are, what's it cost for does anybody know what it costs to combine your parcels, go to a title company? I mean, again,
I'm looking back at,
is it worth them to spend a couple?
Maybe each couple, $200-300 maybe. I don't know exact dollar amount, and it's how complicated the deed is.
okay, so to the $300.
And I guess our goal, one of our goals was to reduce residential from $8 to $5. Like, did that matter? Was that important to residential?
Residential was paying more than many businesses, and so that was one of the things that was looked at as well.
Okay. So if I keep getting complaints, and they can't get out of it because it's on their bill, it's only can be reviewed in July for the next year. We're stuck with what we have. Is that correct?
I can't address that. Someone else from the committee can.
They get their tax bill, it's a fee. They can't. I don't think the fee can't be waived. Is that correct? So the only help they could get in the future is if July 1st next year, we
Okay.
decide to change the code again.
Yes, and if no one saw Mark going, that's correct, yes.
All right. Well, I didn't realize it was going to have this negative of
Right,
impact.
and maybe we
in
can
some
spend
cases.
just a bit of time on
That's
that,
right.
because we asked the question is, can the fee be waived this year while we do this analysis? And there was quite a response back, and Mark or Justin, let's give him a definitive answer on.
Yes, Commissioner Meissner, to your question, as a general rule, the tax has been assessed against the property already, so I don't believe it could be waived. I would want to point out that within the resolution that was approved, and this language has been in there for about, I think 7 or 8 years, there is a provision that says that if there's a solid waste fee for government-owned property, that fee can be waived. The language is not clear on exactly who waives it and the conditions for that, but I did want, since you asked about that, I did want to clarify that there is some language in there in the resolution that you approved back in June.
But I do want to clarify, it does not, I mean, every government property is assessed this, including Sedgwick County government. So if we're going to go and cherry pick which government-owned properties are not going to pay, I think that does create, even under that language, I do think that creates its own issues.
And so, one year, you don't have a slot. What is the total amount collected for all these fees?
The goal is to collect about $2 billion.
$2 billion?
Typically, we plan for about 1.8 to actually be received.
And all those green events on those slides, how much does that eat up the 1.8 million? If we got rid of 1 or 2 of these programs or downsized 5 to 3 or 4, would that directly reduce that 1.8 million down to only in need of 1.5?
Depending which programs you would pick.
Right.
All I know is that we get phone calls year round about when are you having your next coupons out? When are you having your next e-waste? So which programs would you want to pick?
So a resident got a reduction of $8 to $5 and they get all of these
Mhm.
events that they can come to for free.
Let me step aside a second.
And commercial though too. Commercial takes advantage of some of those events too, right, Susan? You get commercial customers coming to those events.
On that note, if you don't mind, Commissioner Meinzer, the discussion about removing businesses from some of these events, I think we need to take into consideration that they're paying an increased fee for some of these services too. So I'm not saying that decision has to be made today, but the fee is on tier 4, we go from $10.67 up to $250 per parcel. Tier 5 is $8.38 up to $500 per parcel. So I think we do need to keep that into consideration. No decisions today, but if they're going to pay for some of these services, that they should be included in some of those services.
What Justin was talking about, where he was reading about the governmental parcels that could be removed, that was when we started talking about this and it was presented to the BOCC. That was on federal parcels, post office, McConnell, et cetera. But it wasn't necessarily for the local governments. So, and as far as multi-parcel, I'm gonna let Ronnie speak.
Multi-parcel is Ronald Tittle, Chief Deputy Appraiser. Multi-parcel is something that has plagued Sedgwick County for a while. And it was one of the discussions we had back in the summertime before we brought this to you, was how do we make it more fair and equitable? Because this thought process went through several revisions and the fees came down because of the multi-parcel issue, which brought residential up. But if we were to get properties combined, Susan said the collection at the current fees would go down. Well, we'd adjust the fees to adjust the budgetary needs for the department. But it would also make the property owners' lives easier because they'd receive fewer value notices, fewer R&R letters, fewer tax bills. It'd make our jobs easier in evaluating it. So it was kind of, okay, this was the least impact we could make for the multi-parcel issue, but with the caveat that we would expressly extent that, if you wanted to save money in future years, combine your parcels, it'd cost you a little bit of money up front, but you'd recoup it within 3 to 5 years on most of the tiers.
Questions, Commissioner? Commissioner Howe?
Thank you. Just doing some quick math here. I may be off on my numbers a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but assessed value is intended, taxes that are based on assessed value is intended to be a uniform and equal process, if you will. I think the reason we're having complaints about this is because it's perceived as not uniform and equal. There's houses next door to each other where one house is worth a lot more than the other. They're paying the same fee. Or people who live in a less affluent neighborhood paying the same fee as a very, very affluent neighborhood. And on it goes. And small businesses paying the same fee as a very large business. It may be similar in some really large. What I'm saying is, if we would get this fee back to again, I still call it a fee, and maybe it's not legal to do this, but roughly a third of $1 million generates the same dollars, roughly. So small, slightly smaller. But if you called this a fee and it was formulaic based on assessed value, you would get to a fairer system, I think. Yet if you live in a very, very large facility or large home, whatever, you have a large business, you pay more. You have a very small situation, you pay almost nothing. So just a thought, but I would, it maybe not be legal, but if you move this to roughly a third of $1 million and call it a fee, it's about the same, it's roughly the same dollars.
Lindsay, do you have, okay.
And Commissioner, how to that point, I'd probably need to analyze this further and talk more with staff. I'm reading the statute. It talks about the authority is to adopt a resolution to establish a schedule of fees to be imposed on real property within any county, solid waste and recyclable service area. I think the simplest way is probably the way we're doing it now, but I'd have to look further to see if it'd be possible to do a formula or something, based on proportion of assessed value or something like that. That may be possible. I just don't know right offhand.
I agree. It's simpler the way it is now, but it's also not equitable, perhaps. That's why we're getting complaints. Feels like we have this feels like buyer's remorse. We changed the system significantly. And now we're getting the blowback from making that change. There's some people who are going to be better off with this new system. Some people are worse off, and they're going to hear from those that are worse off primarily. So this is a type of buyer's remorse. We made a policy change, and there's going to be some people out there that are not going to like the change because they have a lot more fiscal responsibility now than they had before.
And Commissioner Howe, reading further in the statute, I would supplement what I said a little bit. I would have some concerns if it's being based on the value of the property as opposed to the waste generated by the property, as that's really the intent of the statute seems to be based on how much solid waste is it generating, how much activities and responsibilities on the county's part is it incurring. I think if it's tied to value instead, then arguably it's not that. And so I think the process that Susan described that's gone through, whether this time or when this fee was first established by the county, was an effort at doing that in line with the statute, where I worry that if it's based on valuation or something like that, it's a different metric that you're using to determine the fee. So I'd have some concerns about it.
It also wouldn't take into account any of those exemptions. So if you have an exempt property, but you're generating waste, that would be a nuance also that we'd have to work through. So I think there are some things from Justin's analysis that would be problematic in that approach. But again, it doesn't mean we can't go back and relook at this if that's the direction of the commission. We just need to know what the expectation is.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in having some discussion about it.
I would, thank you, Commissioner. I would have, the only question I have is the calculus for city parks in tier 4. I look at tier 3 as elementary and middle schools and fast food. The city parks conversation, I understand, and it's pretty unique. The LCBS tiers, I think, is a unique. I remember vaguely the conversation initially, but I think that adds a fold into this. It's kind of unique. I get it that where they fall on that tier, the LCBS tier. That's a broad category, but city parks in particular in tier 4, the same as Interest Bank Arena. That just seems to me to be about the number. I mean, practically the amount of waste generated between Interest Bank Arena and a city park is.
When Environmental Resources contacted the waste haulers initially, they got massive pushback of, we're not providing you that information. So then Susan and her team came and met with me and Mark, and we started pinpointing certain companies that they could go out and ask the waste haulers about, like, okay, go ask about, fitness centers, go out and ask about amusement parks, go out and ask about movie theaters, go out and ask about sporting arenas. We got all that information back. It all came back in close. Like she said, the 5,000 codes are the recreational community. We assigned the same tier based upon that. We really did not dive deeply into each code. We kind of grouped them as we could with similar activities and similar functions. Could it have been revised? Could we revise it for 2025, for 2026? Absolutely. But we were given a task. We did what we could with the best information we had, and that it was a grouping.
Well, I appreciate that, Ron. That's helpful to understand. I would just say, and then one thought briefly, and then Commissioner Meinzer, that I do think that the conversation, particularly on the city parks, is where I'm getting most of the heartburn. If we can have that discussion and delineate a little bit. I understand this year for the 2024, I get it. Trying to go in and pick and choose there might be some, it might be inequitable to do that. That might be too challenging at this point in time, even to offer credits and some of these things. I understand that, but I do think the conversation about the inequities within those categories might be worth a further discussion. A city park is not generating as much waste as Interest Bank Arena, and to be classified the same, I think, is worth a discussion. Commissioner?
Quick question. If you had a large campus or a mall that had multiple parcels, maybe it had a movie theater and they had restaurants and they had whatever in a mall, and if they combined their parcels into one, they would be treated as just one tier, one time? Or are they still broke up? A university might have a football stadium, might have a dorm, might have all kinds of stuff on one if they combine parcels.
Even if we were to realistically combine all the parcels to the mapping specifications inside for the state of Kansas, you would still have multi-parcel issue for certain areas. Wichita State's a prime example. It sits on 4 sections. Town West Square sits on 2 sections. So, so we have to have 2 parcels. No matter what we do, there's only 2 parcels.
So Town West could be on 2 parcels.
2 parcels, but it would be classified as a regional mall. And within that category, you're expecting restaurants and retail and entertainment under, if you read the definition for that LBCS code, it's kind of encompassing on that.
I'd like to add one thing about parks. Parks normally receive a lot of illegal dumping on them, dumpster dumping. Businesses receive the same thing, where people go behind the building and dump their personal trash in the back of a dumpster. Same things happens to parks. And so no matter what the size, they have trash produced.
Okay. This has been helpful. The conversation we had was robust, and we put a mission forward for the committee to reform these things. And I think you did exactly that. So I appreciate the work that was done in that. It's interesting, all these tiers. So commissioners, any other questions?
Let me ask just a timing question of Susan. So every year you present a solid waste plan, or is it annually?
Annually, and then every 5 is a bigger one.
And in the annual plan, we talk about fees. For the
Correct.
upcoming. So if the commission wanted to revisit some of the tiering question, that time would be during that particular.
Well, and the committee's willing to work on this well before then as well.
We need direction
Yeah.
sooner because the plan has to be adopted by July 1. And so she needs to be able to take it back to her committee. We need to be able to work as a committee to come up with the various fee structures to make sure we can pay for the plan. So I would say by February, we are planning to get back together anyway, just to revisit how things
So
went.
so the commission
So-
might think about this and determine how.
We need direction. If
Yep.
there's expectation of change and what your priorities are, we just need to understand.
And
what
the
that is.
goal is all of the HHW, all the recycling, all these different things need to be funded through this fee. So this needs to be a revenue neutral.
There are a couple other fees that come
Okay.
into this, but yes, overall, the whole plan is built around, it's in a non-property tax supported fund.
Okay.
So it has to support itself.
Okay.
So yes, whatever the commission directs us to do, we will back into the numbers that we need in order to support whatever program
That's
we want
helpful.
to have.
Well, knowing that they're going to meet again in January, if you have any specific questions, you might shoot them over to Lindsay and Susan to see what they can walk into and work on.
Sounds good. Thank
Very
you.
helpful. Thank you. A lot of work done into this. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, Tanya, a legislative platform.
Good morning, commissioners. Okay, so the last time we talked about legislative platform was 2 weeks ago with Jason and Jessica. Tomorrow on the commission agenda, I have to adopt the legislative platform. So made some changes. I don't know. We've talked about this at length, kind of going through each item. So I thought what I could do today was maybe just talk about the changes. So what you have before you is a clean version and then the progress version. So does that sound good for me to walk through maybe additions and edits? Okay. So first item is we were waiting to hear from aging and heard back from them. So they have two items that is under appropriations and it is to support their association, which is K4, is it AD, Tim? Is that how you say it? Okay. Support K4AD request to, so it's add 5 million to the Senior Care Act base funding, and then add 3 million to nutrition services for older adults base funding. Under appraiser elections and treasurer's office, I got from Lindsay some financial information. We're not actually asking for, we don't actually have a number we're asking for. So let me just kind of read this to you. So what I've added is Sedgwick County funded the appraiser and election offices in 2024 at 12.3 million. The auto license support from the general fund in 2024 was 630,000 and is anticipated to be 1 million by 2020. We don't actually have a funding request. I can change that if we want to actually ask a funding request on the legislative platform, but I don't have that for what we have right now.
Do we need to add language about an agreement as we do in some other areas on this platform with what the Treasurers Association is lobbying for?
I'm going to defer to you because you've had conversations with Brandon on that.
I think, I know that the Treasurers Association was looking to have some discussion with legislators, with legislative leadership, to get an understanding from them of what they might be supportive of. As I understand it, to date, they have not yet figured out exactly what that is. So right now, we don't have better language to propose. If we wanted to say we will support whatever the Treasurers Association requests, we could certainly do that to buy us just kind of some open-ended wiggle room as they refine their platform. But we thought, based on the conversation with the commission a couple of weeks ago, that it was important to show them what that fiscal note is and how it's
Agreed.
increasing over time. So whatever you all want, I mean, I don't know what's most effective.
I certainly think that our lobbyist knows what we're aiming for, and I think that this is a conversation that most legislators know we're working through. So, and not knowing what the Treasurers Association is specifically asking for, I'm not sure. Go ahead, Pete.
The 12.3 million, that is the total budget cost for the election and appraiser's office.
Right, it's combined. The general fund support over and above what we budgeted them to bring in revenue.
So both the appraiser and the election office serve multiple jurisdictions, but we pay for them. And in the appraiser's case, we as Sedgwick County catch the bulk of the comments.
Blowback.
Maybe be a little bit weird, but could we have the authority to charge all taxing jurisdictions that we serve in the appraiser's office? Can we back charge them for some of these fees? Can we back charge cities, school districts, everybody to say, hey, we bill it, we collect it, and we distribute it to these places? and we catch most of the comments.
I don't know that there is a mechanism in state law to do that now. Certainly it's something you could do, but I don't know that it addresses the root issue of these are state functions. That would just be taxing basically the same taxpayers that we are through the county, through a consolidated tax bill. I understand your point and the
Sure.
principle.
Well, we
I
could
think
ask
it's
for
just,
a number, but maybe
Right.
part of our message, man, would then just give us the authority to appropriate.
be
Bill for
Be-
services.
Yeah, just
something we could certainly ask for if that's a will.
for 27% of somebody's tax bill. We should be 27% of that $12 million.
Well, and I think what we could look at is something similar to what we do with the sales tax, where it could be based on your dollar levy. I think probably the cities and school districts won't be a real big fan of that.
No, I'm sure.
But
Maybe
it
it
certainly
helps
would be an
show
option.
that
Yes.
we represent all of the
Yes, the
taxing
120, I think, taxing districts in
Yeah.
Sedgwick County, cemetery districts, water districts, all of that.
thought.
Well, and that's how revenue neutral rate is supposed to be set up too, is we're supposed to be able to bill back to those jurisdictions for that mailer when the state quits paying for it. So the mechanism is sort of kind of already out there.
You know, these numbers, the 12.3 and the 1 million, that's just for Sedgwick County. And again, just doing some quick math here. We're 1/6 of the state's population. You multiply that out for the whole state, we're looking at close to $100 million roughly for the whole state. And I don't know if they understand it. So I would just say that this bill probably would not go anywhere. But I think the bill needs to reflect. I think there's another reason to have this bill. The reason to have this bill is it creates a narrative, it creates a discussion that local government is funding state functions. And I would love to see a bill hearing. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but this bill needs to be written and needs to have a bill hearing so we can testify and create, if you will, a solid narrative that we're funding state functions to the tune as a state about $100 million a year that they should be covering. LAVTR wasn't even that much, I don't believe, for the whole state. So again, they just got rid of the one mechanism to replace, some of the revenue that's been used on their behalf. I think that the point could be made very easily that there's $100 million bill that you guys aren't funding, which is actually your stuff. So.
Okay, next item, I just want to point out under ComCare, and this is more for Commissioner Dennis. I know we've got that second bullet is a very long bullet, but I do have a shortened version from ComCare. So no changes on that. I'm going to keep going. Under public services, we took several items out. The one thing that I'm still waiting on is I need a dollar amount because this was requested under the create a pool of matching funds for capital expenditures related to the development and implementation of juvenile crisis intervention services. I think Tim and Rusty were working together to get that, what that dollar amount might look like, but I do not have that as of yet. Okay, I'm going to lean on Commissioner Howe for this. Under corrections, have make enhancements to Senate Bill 367. Is that okay? Okay, so I'll put a period on that one.
I know it sounds simple, but it's such a complex topic. Yeah. Summarize what we're talking about in a sentence, really. So.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, under elections office, I have an addition. Well, let me back up. The first two items, Jason asked me to get with election commissioner Rainwater, and she was supportive of the first two items. She did ask me to add a third, and so the third bullet is what she's added. So that is support legislation limiting the days for special questions submitted elections set forth by resolution by any county, city, unified school district, community college, or township. Special question elections for any county, city, unified school district, community college, or township shall occur on the first Tuesday in March, August, or November. Okay with that?
So it's the primary date, the general date, the only other special date would be in March, correct?
Correct.
It helps us to find, yeah.
Right.
I like it.
I had a question on under finance and economic development, if we want to keep support review of RHID statute for county policy and impact.
And I would say from Brent's perspective, he sees one. tweak that would be good about related to infill and making that more of a priority in the statute, but otherwise doesn't see this as something that is necessary to be worked from the county's perspective because of the policy that you all have adopted and the
Right.
flexibilities.
There was discussion here that we had thought about getting flexibility to where one of the three could exempt themselves, county, city, so we don't think that's an important, Brent doesn't think that's an important piece anymore to.
I think that's more of a policy decision from the commission, but in terms of a process standpoint.
Okay.
And the support that he would need, I don't think that he sees that need any longer. So I just wanted to clarify that portion.
Helpful.
But yes, anytime we want to exempt ourselves from getting sucked into something else, I think we're all for that. A very technical term. So.
Yes.
It's on her, never take it off though.
What do you guys, I'm okay with that. Yeah, I am. Sure, how you doing?
Okay, under Regional Forensic Science Center, there, Rusty had me change some language, but it's very minimal. So just language changes there. And then under Sedgwick County, I did remove support regional water and groundwater contamination issues affecting cities and agriculture industry. That moved to the joint platform. And I will tell you that Chairman Beatty and the manager and myself will be meeting with stakeholders on Thursday to discuss the joint platform. And so I'll be bringing that around probably at the first meeting on January for adoption of the joint platform. Okay, and then one other change is on the very last one, I adopted what the KAC platform language states on home rule. Okay. Okay. So it basically just says extend constitutional protection for county home rule authority. So I just made that slight change in language there. Other than that, if you have anything else you want me to add, edit, change, that looks to be our platform.
Any questions? Commissioner Dennis?
I'd like to bring up one other thing. We were talking about appraiser election office and so forth, but and I don't know if Lindsay got this. She'd be the one that'd have to respond to it. But KAC is asking for input on a survey on mandated services and annual expenses. Did you get a copy of that?
Commissioner Meitzner actually had forwarded that.
Okay.
So
Well, besides the treasurer's office, it's kind of interesting because there's 18 things that are listed beyond the things that we've already talked about today, and they include public health, and they give the KSA requirements for each one of these. I'm not going to read those. But emergency management, solid waste planning, law enforcement, jails, roads and bridges, noxious weeds, election election administration, real property tax collection, personal property tax collection, property registration and record keeping, criminal prosecution, coroner service, district courts, mental health, flood control, property valuation, and various licenses. So it's not just looking at a couple that we put in our legislative agenda. There are statutes out there that require us to do 18 other things besides that. And the fact is, currently, we keep talking about property tax, and that's one of the big issues. In 2008, correct me if I'm wrong, we relied on property tax for about 50% of support of government. In 2024, we rely on property tax for 59% of support of government. And that's due in part to the 18 things that I read, and in addition to the fact that they cut back a number of other ways that we were able to get alternate funding for those things. So I know that this is important, what we've got on our legislative agenda, but it's a bigger story than that.
I mean, I was going to talk to Tom about it, but if the commission, since we're here, if you're okay with me putting that together and then maybe screenshotting the responses so you all have copies, I'd be happy to answer that on behalf of the county.
Yeah.
Submit that to Casey. Okay, I'll plan to do that and I'll get that to
Thank
you
you.
ASAP.
I agree. Thanks. But I thought it'd be good if it comes out of your office, Lindsay, because since we're the second largest county and whatever, probably the KAC would like to know what we have to say, and I didn't want to try to misquote from as an elected commissioner. Yeah. So I think that was, I'd be more rounding numbers instead of, she'll be more accurate. So thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, for taking that on. If that's not too much of a burden.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just for clarification, I think on the page where it refers to Senate Bill 367, I think in parentheses after that, add the year 2016. That way people don't think it's the current year. Same thing on the back page, we reference Senate Bill 13. I think it's in parentheses up at 2019, I believe is the right year. Senate Bill 13 reference. Go ahead.
Which FYI, Jessica Lucas had asked for some draft bill testimony or a draft bill. We've prepared that. So we'll have that ready to go pretty early in the session.
And I'm trying to remember, did we have an agreement in a staff meeting recently that we took the RFSC items off this list? Is that why they're stricken on the back page here? In your regional forensic science, so we have 2 items.
Yeah, so Rusty gave me some
Oh,
edited language. so
It's over
still
here.
on here.
okay,
He just made some minor edits to the language.
okay, all right, thank you.
And once again, Tanya, thank you for your work. on
Yeah.
that. It's a big task and you have to keep track all year long of all the different things that come up that affect us. So great job. Appreciate it.
Are you okay tomorrow? I know that we talk a lot about this in staff meeting, but are you okay tomorrow as I go through this to just read off every item for the public?
No, I
I
think
mean, I know it's a little bit tedious, but I would like the public to kind of understand each item that we have on the agenda.
I concur.
All right, thank you, Commissioners.
Anything else? Oh, that's all we got. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate people coming and helping on the committee and solid waste fees. Thanks for the legislative discussion. See you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Last meeting of the year. For you.
And tomorrow.